Blessings. This is Jaia, Guru without an ashram, but within the entire field. So welcome. I wanted to read just a little bit from the introduction of the Living Beyond Belief book and then tie it into something that is currently present and unfolding. Through our schooling and cultural conditioning, we have been taught to live through our personal intellects, our rational minds, our physical senses, and or our personal goals. But this way of living can take us only so far. It cannot take us into the realm of the heart, capital H, heart, into the realm of heaven on earth. It cannot comprehend the desires of the soul. If we aren't actively questioning the limiting beliefs we have taken on and become willing to let go of them, we can very well produce a life that we would want to ditch. But before we start carrying out plans to ditch that life, we have to understand to a certain degree how that life materialized in the first place. If we don't, we may be tempted to just shuffle the cards, deal ourselves an entirely new hand, and in the end, find ourselves to be in the same situation, surrounded by the same issues, and living a life lacking true fulfillment. So it goes on from there. They wanted to bring that in with the context of lacking true fulfillment and the awareness of what soul desire is and how that differs from our more material desires. So being in a situation, if you're in the middle of a growth situation, and you know there's more to it, you know there's much more going on than maybe others are able to reflect to you. Being able to access what I would call non-ordinary states of consciousness to guide you and direct you, and possibly even have things like, as it's called, spontaneous healings, and be able to just come into a soul awareness around what you're going through. This is something that's happening right now in space for me. And I had a dream last night, and there's been a very the depth of the intensity of this period. When I wrote this book, it was I refer to it as kindergarten. Now, it's not really kindergarten, how to ditch the life your mind created and start living the one your soul intended. So if you're even considering that as a topic in your life, right, that's you're going into a place where you are being drawn and you're open to, what is my soul desiring, and that my mind may have created this entire experience of life. And so it's not quite kindergarten, but it's a beginning level, because a lot of it talks about, it's about personal transformation. And I had someone ask me recently, how can I become a healer? I want to be a healer. And that is where you definitely start with your own healing. And when you go through that for years, and when you have worked with a significant degree like on yourself, and then you begin to work with others. This is the progression, right? So after you go through a lot of your own healing work and reading books and possibly going through a master's program where it's highly experiential, so that was my experience, as well as many, many other programs, and you work with other healers, and you do those things with your own, you know, questions and your own healing and your own beliefs and your own mindset and your deep subconscious work and many, many different things that you can be drawn to in your own healing process. And then to when you're called to, or when people start to come to you a lot, that's another sign. It's that you are a healer, right? People start coming to you. They start wanting that from you and asking. It was really wild, the calls that I would get. And I didn't have a website up. I didn't have a shingle hung up on the door, anything like that. But people were coming to me when they were in crisis, even saying, I'm thinking of committing suicide. Oh my God, I'm just beyond and there's no pay in this. but people would get to the other side of things, and it was grace that was coming through, and to acknowledge it was also, as time went on, it was the skills learned. And for people wanting to go through that process as they're being called to consciously, it doesn't necessarily have to get to that kind of crisis point where you have tools, where we've gone through some of these practices, and sometimes it still gets to that point. And so uh, when your prayer and when your intention is thy will be done, use me, God, for your will, that's a different, very different prayer than I want this, and there's all these conditions that I want fulfilled that you're going to give me, right? Notice that it's not so much the way that it goes. It's more like dealing with the devil, make a deal, I'm going to have all of this and all of this and all of this, and then I'll work for you. With the soul intention, with the heart, you are still you're continuing to purify, but you start out, what I was sharing, you start out working with your own healing, and then it starts to graduate to where others are coming to you, and then you're working with people one-on-one, and then it graduates where you're working with groups, and then you can start working with group dynamics and group energy, and you can even start taking on some things from one-on-one or groups, and then you can start working with larger fields of consciousness and pain bodies that are the first time I heard that, and I believe he coined it, was Eckhart Tolle in his book. It was either The Power of Now, that's probably where it first came from, where there's a pain body, right? An individual pain body. But then there's group pain bodies. And then there's certain places on the planet where there's certain things going on and certain pain bodies. So this dream that I had last night, it was very disconcerting on one level, and on another level it was showing me that the work that I was doing, that people were reflecting to me, spiritual people were reflecting to me, that was coming through this dance that was occurring, and other ways that it was manifesting, that didn't look according to our, a phrase I've heard, colonized consciousness, that was very deep in tantric and shamanic practices. But as these people knew these things, they were saying it was a really positive benefit. And since I didn't have reflections from what you could say the biomedical industry, because it is an industry, uh, that it was a positive benefit in any way, there has been doubt that's been coming in. There has been, also a part of me has just been very much looking into the dynamics of the healing level from that biomedical uh, level of consciousness, which does not include the spiritual in any way. And it is very depressing. It's really heavy. It's really heavy. And what's going on in that field. And there's a on Netflix. There's a movie streaming called Xanax, which is the name of one of the drugs. And as I just heard yesterday, there's large groups forming for people who don't have the support to, once they're on these medications, to get off of them. And they're forming large support groups, and it's people that have been able to do it that are helping the other people. And what I'm finding in this is there's really very little to no spiritual context, except for the people that are going through this personally, questioning things, like even diagnosis, and questioning. And the problem with this is that traditionally, someone's given a diagnosis, and if they don't accept it, and if they say, okay, wait a minute, I don't know if, are you, how do you know? And if they question it in any way, especially if it has to do with a mental health situation, it's put on that person that it's part of their mental health problem, that they're not accepting this diagnosis without any reservations whatsoever. If they're in any way whatsoever questioning the biochemical model and saying, what are the side effects? Do I really want to go that way? If they're questioning in any way, it's put on them, and it's seen as a problem and part of their quote unquote dis-ease. What's very challenging about this part of things also is that industry admits they don't really know the cause. And then at times, from what I'm finding and researching, there is an acknowledgement that trauma can be some of the cause, right, of some of these things. But if trauma is the cause, through my training and my experience of working with 1,000 people, you go in, from my angle, I go in spiritually again, non-ordinary states of consciousness, expanded awareness, what's been traditionally called satori or samadhi, or and the Indians have it. There's so many levels of samadhi. They break down the levels of different levels of awakening and consciousness that you can go into. But you go into an expanded state of awareness, and you realize your oneness with creation, with God, with love. And sometimes spontaneous healings happen in that connection, in that awareness, in that realization, right? And there's spontaneous healings that happen from that, and from other practices and things. So you would want to work with that trauma. You would want to, at the very least, go in on maybe not a spiritually expanded awareness, but certainly in a way that you're looking at beliefs that could have been formed. There's people that work on energy levels and within the body and different things. So you'd want to be at least approaching it from, okay, if the trauma caused it, we really need to be aware of that and look at it from that level. Um, and that the underlying story and narrative and what you are forced to accept instead is that your brain just has a chemical imbalance, and that you have to take a medication with potentially severe side effects, and potentially, according to the person, the individual, it's very individual, um, potentially something that you'll have a huge problem trying to get off of later, if you ever even decide to get off of it. Because the other narrative and the other problem is that instead of a trauma that caused this, and when you heal the trauma, your symptoms will disappear and you recover. Instead of that being a possibility, the entire possibility is that you're given a label that you can never recover from. And that I mean, it's a death sentence in some ways, right? From what's possible for you after that. And you're just going to be labeled, and you just have this dis-ease, and for the rest of your life, right, you're going to be on this chemical that might suppress the very thing that you need access to in order to heal. So people talking about this in their individual stories who have recovered and come out the other side and don't have symptoms anymore. Some people are who say, I still have symptoms, I'm just choosing to live with them, and I'm not wanting them repressed, and they have an entirely different relationship with them. There's different possibilities for different people, again, depending on what is true for them. Um, so we're trailing back now to when this would happen before, but it started happening more, and then so that's the only possibility that you have. Well, we're just going to have to be with that and be present with it. And maybe that's enough said. Because also this is a really challenging. See, if you challenge at all uh, that biomedical model, right? You're seen as a problem. So what does it really mean to be human? What is it to be human? What is it to spiritually awaken and be aware that who you are and what you are goes beyond your physical material experience alone, and that it has a profound effect when you do have that experience, and when you live within that context. So I'm just going to close this by saying, by having that dream and having access to that dream, it's like the soul speaks to you in certain ways, and one of the ways is through dreams. And there's different levels of dreams. So sometimes it's the soul speaking to you and giving you information. Sometimes it is just the underlying, mental, emotional turmoil that's expressing through a dream. Sometimes dreams have, there's a premonition, right? And I remember a family member telling me that they dreamed an entire conversation that someone had with them before it happened. Hmm. And that these things are available to us, that we're much more than just a material brain, mind, bag of bones, nothing else going on here. We're so much more than that. And that this work of continuing to awaken, continuing to be of service, and when you don't have reflections that are reflecting your higher nature, higher purpose, what may be happening from a spiritual context, how limiting that can be, and honestly how depressing that can be. And then the answer wouldn't, in that situation, the answer to that would not be found in a drug. It would be found in, you need to begin to step out of that limited way of seeing and thinking and participating in life, and open into a more expanded awareness of who you are and why you're here. That would be more of the answer, if in fact it is a spiritual evolution and awakening that you're going through. And so there was so much gratitude from the dream, because I hadn't been having dreams. And one thing that I began to become curious about and ask, do those medicines, do they potentially, because they do alter the brain chemistry, those, um, they have a theory, it's only a theory, that your brain chemistry is off, and then the medicines solve that. And they alter brain chemistry because they're solving that problem. And as I was heard it shared the other day, is that, your brain doesn't have the problem, but the medicine goes in and it's the thing that alters the brain chemistry. So my question was, can that alter your connection with spirit, especially if you have done many years of fasting and praying, and you have had many years of meditation? Can it affect your connection with God, with spirit, with, can it interrupt or interfere with a spiritual awakening that you are having, or with an evolutionary way that you're working with the earth through dance, through through very powerful archetypal energies working with you and through you. And it's all really working in the light, and it's on track, and according to the dream, having a profound effect potentially on things. And it is light, and it's a success. But since people with material-based awareness and consciousness only, who haven't had those experiences, and who don't have any information whatsoever about those practices and those things, and those people making decisions and in control of the whole situation, can that have an effect on consciousness? Does it have an effect on that spiritual evolution and awakening that's trying to happen? So these are questions that you could say have been thrown into. And it was so, I want to say, the word coming is redeeming. It was so redeeming to have that dream and to be able to trust myself and to not, you know, to have so much experience where so much feedback and so much healing was coming through for so many years and continues to, in the feedback I continued to get. And even recently, someone from India that lives there, which, really strong, beautiful, positive feedback on something that I did for them and shared with them. And it continues to be of service. This is a big thing for people, that they lose their ability to trust themselves, and they put their authority in an outer source, and they only start listening to that outer source, and everything gets potentially projected onto that person as they're going through that process, or potentially serving at a scale and at a level that's really impossible to measure, right, with current tools or levels of awareness, or people even looking for that kind of thing. Impossible to measure. So when you are doing work at that level, to be able to have the feedback, get the information, and to trust it, and to know when it's all said and done, that you will have a life of fulfillment. What we were starting out in this, that there is a spiritual dimension of your being, that you do feel a deep sense of fulfillment and of knowing that what you are doing and what you've done, and the feedback that you get from spiritual authorities in that part of the world, which is what happened too, they were telling me a completely different thing than the biomedical world was telling me. And I did confront that biomedical world and the people there, and asking them, how can you know that this is not XYZ of the feedback that I'm getting from the other people? How can you know that that's not true? And their response is, we don't. We have no idea. It's not our place. But here's the situation. Here's what we have to do. Here's the protocol. And so then my question is, what if your protocol is harming? What if it's harmful? Isn't it the modern medical, do no harm, right? That's the doctor's agree. What if it's harmful? Since you're admitting you don't know anything about it, what if you harm a person? And since it's shown that these drugs have really potential hardcore side effects, what if you harm someone? And they didn't really have a response for that, but I do. Is that there are consequences to everything, and if you are harming people because you don't know what you're doing, there's an effect there. And so continuing on in this journey, in these times, and continuing to be a source of light, and to have the intention of doing no harm, continuing to surrender to divine will, to the higher consciousness, to the truth of being. And as I've always used to share before, in service to all beings living heaven on earth. It's a pretty tall order, and it might take a bit of time, but it is possible. And with truth, with love,